The dust cloud on the horizon was all Harper Dalton could see through the tears that threatened to spill from her green eyes as she pushed her mare harder across the unforgiving Utah Territory landscape. It was June of 1883, and her younger sister had been missing for 3 weeks, vanished from the boarding house in Salt Lake City, where she had been working as a seamstress. Harper had ridden out from Provo 2 days ago with nothing but a worn photograph, a Derringer pistol her father had given her before his death, and a determination that burned hotter than the summer sun beating down on her shoulders. The trail had led her through rocky passes and across dried creek beds, following whispered rumors and half-truths from travelers who claimed to have seen a young woman matching her sister's description, heading west with a rough-looking group of men. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity, every dead end a knife to her heart. Hannah was only 19 years old, barely a woman, and the thought of what might be happening to her made Harper's stomach turn. She had stopped at a small trading post that morning to water her horse and ask questions when a tall cowboy had overheard her inquiries. He had been leaning against the weathered wooden post, his hat pulled low over his eyes, but something in her desperate voice must have caught his attention because he straightened up and walked over with a measured stride that spoke of confidence without arrogance. "Madam, I could not help but overhear you asking about a missing girl," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Name's Xavier Young. I have been tracking a group of outlaws who have been taking women from towns throughout the territory. If your sister is with them, you are heading into dangerous country." Harper had looked up at him then, really looked at him, and saw a man perhaps 26 or 27 years old with sun-weathered skin, dark brown hair that touched his collar, and gray eyes that held both kindness and a hardness that came from seeing too much of the world's cruelty. There was a scar along his jawline, faint but visible, and his hands rested easy near his guns in a way that told her he knew how to use them. "I do not need anyone's help," she had said, even though her voice trembled slightly. "I can find her myself." Xavier had studied her for a long moment, taking in her travel-stained riding dress, the way she held herself with her shoulders back despite the exhaustion that must have been weighing on her, and the fierce protectiveness in her eyes that reminded him of a wolf defending its pack. "I am sure you can, madam, but 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, and I know this territory better than most. Besides, those men would not think twice about taking you too if they catch you alone." She had wanted to refuse. Harper had spent the last 3 years taking care of herself and Hannah after their parents died, running their small ranch outside Provo, and proving to every doubting man in town that she did not need anyone's protection. But something in Xavier's expression told her this was not about protection or pity. This was about doing what was right, and she was practical enough to know that pride would not bring Hannah home safely. "Fine," she had agreed, mounting her mare with a fluid grace that came from years in the saddle. "But I lead this search. She is my sister." "Would not have it any other way," Xavier had replied, swinging up onto his own horse, a sturdy bay gelding that looked like it could run all day without complaint. That had been 6 hours ago, and they had been riding steadily westward ever since, following the tracks that Xavier seemed to read as easily as Harper read the letters Hannah sent her every week without fail until 3 weeks ago, when they suddenly stopped. The silence had been almost worse than bad news because at least bad news was certain. The not knowing ate at her like a cancer. "There's a canyon up ahead," Xavier said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "Good place for an ambush or a camp. We should approach careful." Harper nodded, slowing her mare to match his pace. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if she had been in any state of mind to appreciate it. Instead, all she could think about was Hannah's smile, the way she hummed while she sewed, how she had been so excited about the job in Salt Lake City because it paid better than anything in Provo. "Tell me about your sister," Xavier said quietly as they rode. "It helps to know who we are looking for." Harper swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. "Hannah is everything good in this world. She is kind and gentle and sees the best in everyone. She wanted to save money to help me with the ranch, said we could hire hands and maybe expand the herd." Her voice broke slightly. "She trusted too easily. I should have made her stay home." "You cannot blame yourself," Xavier said, and there was understanding in his tone. "We all make choices based on what we know at the time. Your sister made a choice to work and help her family. That is admirable, not foolish." "You sound like you have experience with this kind of guilt," Harper observed, glancing at him sidelong. Xavier was quiet for a moment, his jaw tightening. "I had a younger brother once. He followed me into a cattle dispute that turned violent. I thought I could protect him, thought I was fast enough with a gun that nothing bad would happen. I was wrong." He paused, and Harper saw the pain flicker across his features. "He took a bullet meant for me, died before we could get him to a doctor." "I am sorry," Harper said softly, and she meant it. She understood that kind of loss, the kind that hollowed you out and changed the very fabric of who you were. "It is why I do this now," Xavier continued. "Track outlaws, help people who need it. Cannot bring my brother back, but maybe I can stop other families from feeling that kind of pain." They rode in companionable silence after that, and Harper found herself grateful for his presence despite her earlier resistance. There was something solid about Xavier Young, something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, they would find Hannah alive and well. As they approached the canyon entrance, Xavier held up his hand, signaling her to stop. He dismounted silently and moved forward on foot, his movements fluid and careful. Harper followed his lead, her hand resting on the derringer in her pocket, even though she knew it would be little use against multiple armed men. The canyon walls rose up on either side of them, red rock worn smooth by centuries of wind and water. In the fading light, shadows pooled in the crevices and made every stone look like a potential threat. Harper's heart pounded in her chest as they crept forward, and she could hear the faint sound of voices echoing off the canyon walls. Xavier motioned for her to stay back, but Harper shook her head stubbornly. If Hannah was in there, she needed to see with her own eyes. They moved together, staying low, until they reached a bend in the canyon where they could peer around without being seen. What Harper saw made her blood run cold. There was a camp set up in a wider part of the canyon, with 4 men sitting around a fire cooking some kind of meat. Off to the side, tied to a scrubby tree, were 3 women. Even from this distance, Harper could see they were terrified, their clothes torn and dirty, their faces hollow with fear and exhaustion. But Hannah was not among them. Harper felt her heart sink even as relief flooded through her. Relief that her sister was not in such a terrible situation, but despair that they still had not found her. She must have made some small sound because Xavier's hand closed gently around her arm, steadying her. "We can help them," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "But we need a plan." "There are 4 of them and 2 of us." Harper nodded, trying to think clearly despite the emotions churning inside her. "If we can create a distraction, get them away from the women, we might have a chance." Xavier studied the camp layout, his eyes calculating. "See that pile of deadwood near their horses? If we can get a fire started there, it will spook the horses and draw their attention. While they are dealing with that, we get the women free and get out." "And if they start shooting?" Harper asked. "Then we shoot back," Xavier said grimly. but let us hope it does not come to that. They spent the next 15 minutes working their way around the canyon to approach from the opposite side, where the horses were tethered. Xavier had some matches in his saddlebag, and he used them to get a small fire going in the dry brush near the deadwood pile. It caught quickly, the flames licking up hungrily and sending smoke billowing into the evening air. The reaction from the camp was immediate. The men jumped up, shouting and cursing as they saw their horses beginning to panic and pull at their tethers. All 4 of them rushed over, trying to calm the animals and put out the fire before it spread. Harper and Xavier moved fast, racing to where the women were tied. Harper pulled out a small knife she kept in her boot and began sawing through the ropes while Xavier kept watch, his gun drawn and ready. "We are here to help," Harper whispered urgently to the frightened women. "But we need to move quickly and quietly. Can you walk?" The women nodded, too scared to speak, and as soon as they were free, Xavier led them back the way he and Harper had come, moving as silently as possible. They had almost reached the horses when one of the men shouted, "Hey, the women are gone. Run." Xavier ordered, and they did, stumbling and scrambling over the rocky ground as shouts and gunfire erupted behind them. Harper felt a bullet whiz past her head close enough that she could hear it, and fear gave her feet wings. They reached the horses, and Xavier practically threw the women onto his bay, telling them to hold on tight, while he and Harper mounted her mare together, Harper in front and Xavier behind her, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. They rode hard out of that canyon, the sound of pursuit loud behind them, and Harper pressed herself back against Xavier's solid chest as he urged the mare to go faster. The horse responded gamely, her hooves pounding against the hard earth, and behind them Xavier's bay kept pace with its triple load. They rode for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, putting distance between them and the outlaws until Xavier finally slowed their pace, listening for signs of continued pursuit. When none came, he guided them to a sheltered spot between 2 large boulders where they could rest and regroup. The women slid off the bay, their legs shaking, and Harper dismounted to check on them while Xavier kept watch. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently. "Did they harm you?" The oldest of the 3, a woman probably in her 30s with auburn hair, shook her head. "They were saving us," she said, her voice hoarse. "Said they had a buyer in California who paid good money for women. We were being taken there to be sold." The casual horror of it made Harper's stomach churn. "Where were you taken from?" "I was taken from Nephi," the auburn-haired woman said. "2 weeks ago. I was walking home from the general store when they grabbed me." The other 2 women, both younger, had similar stories. One from Fillmore, one from a small settlement Harper had never heard of. None of them had seen or heard of a girl matching Hannah's description. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Xavier said, joining them. "Provo is the closest town, about a day's ride northeast from here. I know the sheriff there. He is a good man and will help you get home." Harper's mind was racing. If Hannah was not with this group, then where was she? Had she been taken by different men? Was she already in California, being sold to the highest bidder? The thought made her feel physically ill. "Harper," Xavier said softly, and she realized he had been saying her name. "We need to move. Those men might come looking for us once they calm their horses." She nodded, helping the women back onto Xavier's horse. This time, Xavier rode with them, leading the way while Harper followed on her mare. The moon had risen, nearly full, casting enough light that they could see the trail ahead. As they rode through the night, Harper found herself watching Xavier's silhouette against the starlit sky. He sat easy in the saddle despite the extra weight his horse carried, and he kept checking to make sure the women were holding on, and that Harper was keeping pace. There was a quiet competence about him that she found herself admiring, a steadiness that made her feel less alone in her desperate search. They reached Provo late the next afternoon, the horses exhausted, and the riders even more so. Xavier took the 3 rescued women straight to the sheriff's office while Harper went to get fresh horses from the livery stable. The liveryman, old Mr. Peterson, who had known her father, looked at her with concern. "Miss Dalton, you look about ready to drop. What has happened?" Harper gave him the abbreviated version while he saddled 2 fresh horses, and she saw the anger flash in his weathered face. "There have been rumors of women disappearing, but nothing confirmed. The sheriff will want to talk to those women you rescued." "Xavier is with them now," Harper said. "But I need to keep searching for Hannah. Every day that passes." She did not finish the sentence, but Mr. Peterson nodded in understanding. "Your sister is a good girl. I pray you find her safe." He paused, then added, "That Xavier Young fellow, he's got a good reputation. Honest, fair, and hell with a gun when he needs to be. You could do worse for a partner in this." Harper thanked him and led the fresh horses to the sheriff's office, where she found Xavier giving his statement to Sheriff Morrison, a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Miss Dalton," the sheriff greeted her, "Young here has been telling me about your sister. I will wire the surrounding towns and territories, get people looking for her. Do you have a photograph?" Harper pulled the worn photograph from her pocket and handed it over. It showed Hannah standing in front of their ranch house, smiling at the camera with the sun in her hair. She looked so young, so innocent, and Harper had to look away before the tears came. "I will do everything I can," Sheriff Morrison promised. "But Miss Dalton, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that—" "No," Harper cut him off firmly. "She is alive. I would know if she was not. I would feel it." The sheriff exchanged a look with Xavier but nodded. "Fair enough. Young, you take care of her out there. This is dangerous business." "I intend to, sir," Xavier replied. They left Provo as the sun was setting, heading west again because Xavier had heard rumors of another group of traffickers operating out of a mining camp near the Nevada border. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. As they made camp that night under a sky full of stars, Harper found herself sitting close to the fire, staring into the flames without really seeing them. Xavier was checking their supplies, making sure they had enough food and water for the journey ahead. "You should eat something," he said, handing her a piece of jerky and some hardtack. Harper took it but just held it in her hands. "What if we do not find her, Xavier? What if we are too late?" Xavier sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body in the cooling night air. "Then we will deal with that when and if it happens. But until then, we do not give up. You do not give up. I can see how much you love your sister, Harper. That kind of love does not quit." She looked at him then, really looked at him in the firelight, and saw not just a skilled tracker or a competent gunman, but a man who understood pain and loss and the desperate need to make things right. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "You do not know me. You do not know Hannah. You could be anywhere else, doing anything else." Xavier was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and honest. "Because when I look at you, I see someone fighting for something that matters. I see courage and determination and love. Those are things worth helping. And if I am being honest, I see someone I would like to know better, when all this is over." Harper felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "I am not exactly at my best right now." "You are magnificent," Xavier said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. "I have known men who would have given up by now, who would have let fear or exhaustion stop them, but you keep going. That takes a special kind of strength." They sat in silence for a while after that, and Harper found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawing comfort from his presence. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of the ranch and Hannah's care by herself, that she had forgotten what it felt like to share a burden with someone else. "Tell me about your ranch," Xavier said eventually. "What is it like?" Harper smiled slightly, thinking of home. "It is small but beautiful. About 200 acres with good grazing land and a creek that runs year-round. My father bought it 20 years ago, built the house with his own hands. After he died, I was determined to keep it going, to prove that I could do it without a husband or a brother to help." She paused. "Hannah loved it there. She would sit on the porch in the evenings and sew while I did the accounts, and we would talk about everything and nothing." "It sounds perfect," Xavier said. "The kind of place a man could put down roots if he had a mind to." Harper looked at him sharply, but his expression was unreadable in the flickering firelight. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Or was she reading too much into innocent words because she was tired and emotionally raw? They traveled for 2 more days, asking questions at every settlement and trading post they passed, showing Hannah's photograph to anyone who would look. Most people shook their heads, but a few thought they might have seen her, heading west with a well-dressed man in a fancy carriage. That description did not fit the rough outlaws they had encountered before, and it gave Harper a new kind of worry. If Hannah had not been taken by force, if she had gone willingly with someone who seemed respectable, then they might be dealing with something even more sinister. A confidence man, perhaps, someone who lured young women with promises of marriage or employment, and then sold them once they were far from home. They reached the mining camp on the 3rd day, a rough collection of tents and hastily constructed buildings where men came to seek their fortune in silver. It was a lawless place, full of drink and gambling and violence, and Harper felt distinctly uncomfortable as they rode down the main street with dozens of eyes tracking their progress. Xavier led them to the largest building, which turned out to be a combination saloon and hotel. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. Men lounged at tables playing cards or drinking, and a few women in garish dresses worked the room, trying to separate the miners from their money. "We are looking for information about a missing girl," Xavier said to the bartender, a heavy-set man with a scar across his nose. 19 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, might have come through here in the last few weeks. The bartender looked them over slowly, his gaze lingering on Harper in a way that made her skin crawl. "Information costs money." Xavier slid a silver dollar across the bar. The bartender made it disappear and leaned in conspiratorially. "There was a girl like that here about 10 days ago. Came in with a man named Blackwell, fancy dresser, always talked smooth. He deals in girls, sells them to brothels in California and Nevada. He was bragging about how this one would fetch a high price because she was innocent, could still pass for a lady." Harper's hands clenched into fists. "Where did they go?" Blackwell mentioned heading to Silver City in Nevada. "Got contacts there." The bartender paused. "But that was 10 days ago. They could be anywhere by now." Xavier thanked him and guided Harper back outside before she could do something rash like overturn a table or start screaming. Outside, she stood in the dusty street, shaking with anger and fear. "Silver City," Xavier said. "It is about 3 days' ride northwest. If we push hard, we might catch up to them." Harper nodded, not trusting her voice. 10 days. Blackwell had a 10-day head start. Anything could have happened in that time. But she could not think about that, could not let herself imagine the horrors her sister might be enduring. She had to focus on the goal, on finding Hannah and bringing her home. They rode out immediately, not bothering to rest despite their exhaustion. The landscape grew harsher as they traveled northwest, with less water and more desert scrub. The heat was oppressive during the day, and the nights were surprisingly cold. They took turns sleeping, one always keeping watch in case of trouble. On the second night, Harper woke from a restless sleep to find Xavier sitting by the fire, his rifle across his lap and his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond their camp. She sat up, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. "Could not sleep?" she asked quietly. Xavier glanced at her and shook his head. "Too much on my mind." Harper moved to sit beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "Want to talk about it?" He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I keep thinking about what your sister might be going through. Keep thinking about how scared she must be, how alone she must feel. And I think about you, about how you have not given up even when most people would have. It makes me want to do better, be better." "You are a good man, Xavier Young," Harper said softly. "I knew that the moment you offered to help me, even though I was a stranger." "You do not feel like a stranger anymore," Xavier said, turning to look at her. In the firelight, his gray eyes were almost silver. "You feel like someone I have been waiting to meet my whole life." Harper's breath caught. They were sitting so close, and she could see the sincerity in his expression, the warmth that went beyond simple attraction. Something had grown between them over these days on the trail, something real and solid built on shared purpose and mutual respect. "Xavier," she whispered, and then he was kissing her, gentle but insistent, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Harper kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and desperate need for connection into it. For just a moment, she let herself forget about Hannah and outlaws and the impossible task ahead of her. For just a moment, she let herself feel the warmth of his lips, the strength of his arms as they came around her, the way her heart raced in a way that had nothing to do with fear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I am sorry," he said. "That was not appropriate. You have enough to deal with without me complicating things." "Do not apologize," Harper said firmly. "I wanted that, I needed that. You remind me that there is still good in this world, still things worth fighting for besides just survival." They sat together for a long time after that, Harper's head on Xavier's shoulder and his arm around her waist, watching the fire burn down to embers. When Harper finally fell asleep again, she felt safer than she had in weeks. They reached Silver City late the next afternoon, another rough mining town but larger and more established than the camp they had left behind. There was actually a hotel with glass windows and a proper restaurant, and the streets were laid out in something resembling order. Xavier asked around while Harper waited with the horses, showing Hannah's photograph and describing Blackwell. Finally, he got a lead from a shop owner who remembered seeing them 2 days ago. Blackwell had stopped to buy supplies before heading to what he called his enterprise on the edge of town. Harper and Xavier found the building easily enough. It was a 2-story structure with barred windows and a heavy door, and there were guards posted outside. The guards eyed them suspiciously as they approached. "We are looking for a girl," Xavier said. "Blonde, 19, blue eyes. Taken by a man named Blackwell. She is this woman's sister." The guards exchanged glances, and one of them said, "Do not know nothing about that. Move along." Harper stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "My sister is in there. I know she is. Let me see her." "Lady, I said move along," the guard repeated, his hand dropping to his gun. Xavier put his hand on Harper's arm, holding her back. "We will pay," he said. "Name your price." The guards laughed. "Blackwell does not sell them before they have been trained proper. Come back in a few weeks, maybe he will have something for you." That was when Harper pulled out her derringer and pointed it straight at the guard's face. "Open that door, or I swear to God I will shoot you where you stand." The guard's eyes widened, and he started to draw his own gun, but Xavier was faster. His revolver was out and cocked before the guard could clear leather. "I would suggest you do as the lady says." The standoff lasted several tense seconds before the second guard, who looked younger and less sure of himself, said, "Look, we do not get paid enough for this. The key is hanging inside the door." The first guard glared at him but slowly raised his hands. Xavier kept his gun trained on them while Harper pushed past and into the building. Inside, it was dim and smelled of mildew and fear. She could hear sobbing coming from upstairs and took the stairs two at a time. The upper floor was divided into small rooms, each with a barred door. Harper ran from one to the next, peering inside, her heart in her throat. The women inside looked at her with empty, hopeless eyes, and Harper wanted to free them all, wanted to burn this whole cursed place to the ground. And then she saw her. In the last room on the right, sitting on a thin mattress with her arms wrapped around her knees, was Hannah. Her dress was torn, her hair tangled, and her face was bruised, but she was alive. "Hannah!" Harper screamed, and her sister's head jerked up, her blue eyes going wide with disbelief. "Harper!" Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. "Is it really you?" "It is me. I am here. I am getting you out," Harper said, yanking at the locked door. She called down to Xavier, "I need the key. I found her." There was the sound of a scuffle below, then pounding footsteps, and Xavier appeared with a ring of keys. He began trying them in the lock while Harper reached through the bars to grasp her sister's hand. "I thought I would never see you again," Hannah sobbed. "He said no one would come for me, that I was alone in the world." "I will always come for you," Harper said fiercely. "Always." The lock finally clicked open and Harper rushed in, pulling Hannah into her arms and holding her as she cried. Her sister felt too thin, too fragile, and Harper wanted to kill Blackwell with her bare hands for what he had done. "We need to go," Xavier said urgently from the doorway. The guards ran off, probably to get help. "We have minutes at most." Harper helped Hannah to her feet, supporting her weight as they made their way back downstairs. But they had only made it to the main floor when the front door burst open and a well-dressed man with slicked back hair and cold eyes stepped through, a gun in his hand. "Well, well," Blackwell said. "A rescue attempt. How touching." He looked at Xavier. "You just made a very expensive mistake, friend. That girl is my property and I do not take kindly to thieves." "She is not property," Harper spat. "She is a human being and you are a monster," Blackwell laughed. "Call me what you want, sweetheart, but that does not change facts. The girl came with me willingly. She wanted to see California, wanted adventure. Not my fault she changed her mind when she saw what her new life would entail." "You lied to me," Hannah cried. "You said you were taking me to work as a seamstress in a dress shop." "And you were stupid enough to believe me," Blackwell said with a shrug. "Now, you folks are going to put down your guns and walk away, or I am going to put bullets in all of you." Xavier's jaw tightened. "You are not taking her. We are leaving here, all of us, and you are not going to stop us." "Big words from a man I could kill before he clears leather," Blackwell said. "Try it," Xavier said, and there was something deadly in his voice that made even Blackwell hesitate. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Harper could feel her sister trembling against her and knew they needed to end this quickly. She still had the derringer in her hand, and slowly, carefully, she raised it. Blackwell saw the movement and swung his gun toward her. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Blackwell's shot went wide, shattering a window, and Harper's bullet caught him in the shoulder. He staggered back with a cry of pain, and Xavier was on him in an instant, disarming him and slamming him against the wall. "Harper, get your sister out of here," Xavier ordered. "I will handle this." But Harper did not want to leave Xavier alone with an injured but still dangerous man. "We go together or not at all." Xavier looked like he wanted to argue, but there was no time. Shouts were coming from outside, and they could hear more men approaching. Xavier grabbed Blackwell and shoved him toward the door. "You are going to tell your men to stand down, or I will let this woman shoot you again, and next time she will aim for something more vital." Blackwell, pale and sweating, nodded. They emerged from the building with Blackwell as a human shield, just as a group of armed men came running up. Xavier made Blackwell order them to drop their weapons, and after a tense moment, they complied. "Now we are all going to walk to the horses nice and slow," Xavier said. "Anyone tries anything, Blackwell dies first." They made it to where their horses were tied, and Xavier kept his gun on Blackwell while Harper helped Hannah mount. Once her sister was secure, Harper swung up behind her and Xavier finally released Blackwell, giving him a hard shove that sent him sprawling in the dirt. They rode out of Silver City at a gallop, not slowing until the town was far behind them and there were no signs of pursuit. Finally, Xavier called a halt near a small stream where they could rest and water the horses. Hannah slid off the horse and collapsed onto the ground, shaking with relief and delayed shock. Harper knelt beside her, holding her close and stroking her hair while she cried. "You are safe now," Harper murmured. "I have got you. You are safe." Xavier gave them space, tending to the horses and keeping watch, but Harper could feel his gaze on them, warm and protective. When Hannah's sobs finally subsided into hiccups, Harper helped her drink some water and eat a little bit of jerky, though her sister's hands were shaking too badly to hold anything. "I am so sorry," Hannah whispered. "I am so stupid. I should have known better than to trust him." "You are not stupid," Harper said firmly. "He was a practiced liar who knew exactly what to say to gain your trust. None of this is your fault, do you hear me? None of it." Hannah nodded, but Harper could see the guilt and shame in her sister's eyes and knew it would take a long time for those wounds to heal. She held her sister close as night fell, and Xavier built a fire and stood first watch. Later, when Hannah had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by emotion and trauma, Harper joined Xavier by the fire. He looked at her with concern. "Are you all right?" "I will be," Harper said. "Now that I have her back." She paused, then added quietly, "I shot a man today." "You did what you had to do to protect your sister," Xavier said. "And for what it is worth, that man deserved worse than what he got." Harper nodded, but her hands were still trembling slightly. Xavier took them in his own, his calloused palms warm and rough against her skin. "You are one of the bravest people I have ever met," he said. "What you did today, what you have been doing for weeks, it takes incredible courage and strength. Your sister is lucky to have you." "I am lucky to have found you," Harper said, meeting his eyes. "I do not know what I would have done without your help, Xavier. You saved us today." "We saved each other," Xavier corrected. "You were ready to take on that whole building by yourself if you had to." They sat together in the firelight, hands clasped, and Harper felt something shift inside her. This man, who had been a stranger just days ago, had become essential to her in a way she could not quite explain. He had seen her at her worst and her best, and he had never wavered in his support or his belief in her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "When we get back to Provo?" Xavier looked at her for a long moment, and she could see hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "I suppose that depends on what you want. I could move on, find another cause to fight for, or—" He trailed off. "Or," Harper prompted. "Or I could stay," Xavier said, "if you would have me." "I have been drifting for a long time, Harper, ever since my brother died. But being with you these past days, helping you, it has made me feel like maybe I could stop drifting. Like maybe I found a place where I belong." Harper's heart swelled. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much. The ranch is big enough for 3 and I could use the help, and—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "And I have feelings for you, Xavier. Real feelings." I know the timing is terrible and we barely know each other, but when I look at you I see a future I want to be part of." Xavier's smile was brighter than the fire. He leaned in and kissed her, gentle and sweet, and Harper kissed him back, feeling like maybe, just maybe, something good had come out of this nightmare. The journey back to Provo took 4 days because they traveled slowly to accommodate Hannah, who was still weak and traumatized. Xavier was patient and kind with her, never pushing, always giving her space while still making sure she felt safe. Harper watched him with her sister and fell a little more in love with him every day. They stopped at Sheriff Morrison's office when they arrived in Provo, and the sheriff was relieved to see Hannah alive and well. He took their statements about Blackwell and promised to wire the authorities in Silver City to have him arrested for kidnapping and human trafficking. "You did good work, Young," the sheriff said, shaking Xavier's hand. "And you too, Miss Dalton. Took a lot of courage to go after your sister like that." Harper thanked him, but all she wanted was to get Hannah home and into a proper bath and bed. They rode out to the ranch as the sun was setting, and Harper felt her throat tighten as the familiar buildings came into view. She had been so afraid she would never bring Hannah back here, never see her sister safe in their home again. Over the next few weeks, they all settled into a new routine. Hannah slowly began to heal, both physically and emotionally, with Harper's patient care and Xavier's steady presence. Xavier moved into the small bunkhouse on the property and began working the ranch, proving to be as skilled with cattle and horses as he was with tracking and firearms. Harper found herself watching him work from the porch, admiring the easy way he moved, the quiet competence he brought to every task. And she caught him watching her too, with warmth in his eyes that made her feel beautiful and desired and cherished. One evening about a month after their return, Xavier found Harper sitting on the porch watching the sunset. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Hannah seems better," he said. "She was smiling today when I saw her in the garden." "She is getting there," Harper agreed. "It will take time, but she is strong. We both are." She turned to look at him. "Thanks in part to you. You have been wonderful with her, Xavier, patient and kind and never pushing." "She has been through hell," Xavier said simply. "She deserves all the patience in the world." He paused, then added, "And so do you. I know you were carrying a lot even before Hannah went missing. The ranch, the responsibility, the loneliness. I hope I have helped with some of that." "You have helped with all of it," Harper said. "Having you here, it has made everything easier, better." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I love you, Xavier Young. I know it has only been a couple of months, and maybe I am supposed to wait longer to say something like that, but I have never been one for following rules when they do not make sense." Xavier's face lit up like sunrise. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling for you that first day when you looked at me with such fierce determination and told me you did not need anyone's help. You were magnificent then, and you are magnificent now." He kissed her, and Harper melted into him, feeling like she had finally come home. When they broke apart, both smiling, Xavier pulled a small box from his pocket. "I was going to wait for a better moment, do this properly," he said, "but I have never been much for proper either." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "Harper Dalton, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to work hard to stand by your side and to love you for the rest of my days." Harper felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were happy tears this time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 months later in the small church in Provo, with Hannah standing up as Harper's maid of honor, and Sheriff Morrison giving the bride away since their father was gone. It was a simple ceremony, But Harper had never felt more beautiful than she did in her mother's wedding dress, with Xavier looking at her like she was the only woman in the world. Hannah cried happy tears throughout the ceremony, and when it was over, she hugged Harper tight and whispered, "I am so glad you found him. You deserve all the happiness in the world." "So do you," Harper whispered back. "And you will find it in time. I know you will." Xavier and Harper honeymooned at the ranch because neither of them wanted to be anywhere else. They spent their days working side by side, expanding the herd and making improvements to the property, and their nights wrapped in each other's arms, discovering all the ways they fit together. Hannah began to heal more fully as the months passed. She started sewing again, first just small projects, but eventually taking commissions from women in town who wanted new dresses. She found purpose and joy in her work, and slowly the light came back to her eyes. A year after their wedding, Harper discovered she was pregnant. Xavier was overjoyed, picking her up and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down before she got dizzy. Hannah was delighted at the prospect of becoming an aunt and immediately began sewing baby clothes. Their son was born on a warm spring morning in 1885, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him James Xavier Young after both grandfathers, and Harper had never known love like what she felt holding her baby boy while Xavier sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders and his eyes full of wonder. Hannah held her nephew and cried, but they were healing tears, cleansing tears. "He is perfect," she whispered. "Just perfect." The ranch continued to prosper under Xavier and Harper's joint management. They hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work, which gave them more time to focus on their growing family. 2 years after James was born, Harper delivered a daughter they named Rose. She had Harper's green eyes and Xavier's dark hair, and she was spoiled rotten by her Aunt Hannah. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle that died of disease, and the constant struggle to make ends meet that came with ranching. But they faced everything together, Harper and Xavier, partners in every sense of the word. Hannah eventually met a kind schoolteacher named Thomas who had moved to Provo from back east. He was patient and gentle with her, understanding about her past without pitying her, and when he proposed 2 years after they met, Hannah said yes. Harper cried at her sister's wedding, so proud of how far Hannah had come and so grateful that she had found someone who truly loved her. The two couples remained close, with Hannah and Thomas building a house just a few miles from the ranch. Their children grew up together, cousins and best friends, running wild through the Utah countryside that had once seemed so threatening but had become home. On warm summer evenings, the two families would gather on Harper and Xavier's porch, watching the children play while the adults talked and laughed. Harper would lean into Xavier's side, feeling his solid warmth, and think about how close she had come to losing everything. How close Hannah had come to being lost forever, but they had survived. More than survived, they had thrived. They had built lives full of love and purpose and joy. And it had all started with a desperate search, a chance meeting with a cowboy who offered to help, and a love that grew from shared danger into something enduring and true. Years later, when James and Rose were grown with families of their own, Harper and Xavier would sit on that same porch and watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Xavier's hair had gone silver and Harper's face bore the lines of age and laughter, but they still held hands like newlyweds. "You ever think about that summer?" Harper asked one evening. "When we first met?" "All the time," Xavier said. "Best decision I ever made, offering to help you find Hannah." "Best decision I ever made was letting you," Harper replied with a smile. Xavier raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Harper Young." just as much as I did that day I first saw you, desperate and fierce and beautiful, asking about your missing sister." "I love you too," Harper said. "Thank you for never turning back." "Would not have dreamed of it," Xavier said. "You were always my destination. I just did not know it until I met you." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in twilight colors. In the distance, they could hear the laughter of their grandchildren playing and the sound of their son calling them in for supper. The ranch land stretched out before them, acres of grass and cattle and home. Hannah and Thomas rode up the path on their way to join them for dinner, and Harper waved to her sister. Hannah waved back, smiling, whole and happy and free. Everything Harper had fought for, everything she and Xavier had built together, was represented in that moment. The Wild West was becoming more civilized with each passing year, the rough edges smoothing out as law and order took hold. But Harper and Xavier still remembered those days of danger and desperation, when a woman rode west searching for her missing sister and a cowboy joined her trail and never turned back. Those days had forged them, tested them, and ultimately shown them what they were truly made of. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Harper squeezed Xavier's hand and knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single moment of their journey. The fear, the pain, the desperate search, all of it had been necessary to bring them to this point. To this life full of love and family and purpose. She had ridden west searching for her sister and found so much more. She had found courage she did not know she possessed. She had found the strength to face impossible odds. And most importantly, she had found a partner who would stand beside her through anything, a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives. Xavier leaned over and kissed her temple, and Harper closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of sage and cattle and home. This was what happy endings looked like, she thought. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and lasting and earned through struggle and sacrifice. The door opened and James called out, "Ma, Pa, dinner is ready. Are you coming?" "Yes, son," Xavier called back. "We will be right there." But they sat for another moment, neither wanting to break the spell of the evening. Finally, Xavier stood and offered Harper his hand, pulling her to her feet. They walked into the house hand in hand, surrounded by the noise and warmth of their family. And if Harper sometimes still had nightmares about that terrible summer, about what might have happened if Xavier had not offered to help, if they had been too late to save Hannah, she would wake to find Xavier beside her, solid and real and warm. He would pull her close and whisper that she was safe. They were all safe, and everything had worked out just as it was meant to. The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and anniversaries, by births and deaths and all the moments in between. The ranch passed to James eventually, when Harper and Xavier grew too old to manage it themselves, but they stayed on in the house they had built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Hannah remained her best friend and closest confidante through it all, and the two sisters would often sit together, marveling at how their lives had turned out, how close they had come to tragedy, and how they had emerged on the other side stronger and more grateful for every ordinary day. When Xavier died at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Harper beside him, she grieved deeply but without regret. They had been given over 40 years together, 4 decades of love and partnership and shared purpose. He had been her rock, her partner, her great love, and she had been his. Harper lived for another 5 years after Xavier's death, surrounded by the family they had built together. On her last day, with Hannah holding one hand and James holding the other, she smiled and said, "Tell your father I am on my way. Tell him to wait for me at the trail head, just like he did that first day." And then she closed her eyes and went to join him, her heart full and her life complete. They buried Harper beside Xavier on a hillside overlooking the ranch with a simple stone that read, Harper Dalton Young, 1859–1928. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She rode west and found everything she was looking for, and beside it, Xavier's stone. Xavier Young, 1857–1923. Beloved husband, father, grandfather. He joined her trail and never turned back. The stones stood side by side, weathering storms and seasons, a testament to a love that had started in desperation and fear, but had grown into something beautiful and lasting. Future generations would visit those graves and hear the story of how their ancestors met, of the brave woman who refused to give up on her sister, and the cowboy, who gave her the support she needed to complete her impossible mission. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering. A story of courage and determination, and love in its purest form. The kind of story that proved, even in the hardest times, in the most desperate circumstances, human connection could flourish and thrive. Hannah lived to be 92 years old, long enough to hold her own great-great-grandchildren and tell them stories about her sister, the strongest woman she had ever known. She would tell them about that terrible summer when she was taken, and about how Harper had ridden across dangerous territory to find her, refusing to give up no matter how impossible the task seemed. And she would tell them about Xavier, the cowboy with kind gray eyes who had offered to help a desperate stranger and ended up finding the love of his life. How he and Harper had built something beautiful together, a legacy that would endure for generations. The ranch that Harper and Xavier built continued to operate well into the 20th century, passed down through their children and grandchildren. The land they had fought so hard to keep thrived, and the family they had created spread across Utah and beyond, carrying their story with them. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the wind blew just right across those hills, old-timers swore they could see two figures on horseback riding the fence line together, a woman with red hair and a man with a cowboy hat, their hands clasped as they surveyed the land they had loved so well. Whether it was true or just a romantic story told to entertain children, no one could say for certain. But those who had known Harper and Xavier in life said it would be just like them to keep watch over their ranch and their family, even after death. They had been partners in everything during life. Why should death change that? The legacy of Harper Dalton Young and Xavier Young lived on in the values they had instilled in their children and the stories that were passed down through generations. Stories about courage in the face of impossible odds, about love that grew from shared struggle, about the importance of family and the strength that comes from refusing to give up, no matter how dark things seem. They had lived in a time when the West was still wild, when danger lurked around every corner and justice was uncertain at best. But they had carved out a place of safety and love in that harsh landscape, building something that would endure long after they were gone. And that, in the end, was the truest measure of their success. Not the acres they owned or the cattle they raised, but the family they built and the love they shared. A love that started on a dusty trail in 1883 with a desperate woman and a compassionate cowboy, and grew into something legendary. The sun set on the Wild West, as it must on all eras, but the story of Harper and Xavier remained, a bright spot in the tapestry of American history. A reminder that even in the darkest times, love can flourish, that strangers can become soulmates, that courage can overcome any obstacle. She had ridden west searching for her missing sister. He had joined her trail and never turned back. And together they had found not just Hannah, but a love that would echo through the ages, inspiring all who heard their story to believe in the power of determination, compassion, and the enduring strength of the human heart. Their story was complete, their lives well lived, their legacy secure. And in that, there was a perfect, satisfying ending. The kind of ending that came not from fantasy but from real love, real struggle, and real triumph over adversity. The best kind of ending there was.